I am very excited to be here with Tim Polecat. Tim, thanks so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us here.
My pleasure. I'm not actually that busy. I'm kind of kicked back, you know.
You are a humble man.
Okay.
Well, you guys just did an epic show here at SLO Brew in San Luis Obispo, and it was a great show. You guys brought so much energy. I really appreciate just being able to see you perform.
I'm glad I've got some energy left in me, to be honest. I'm a veteran.
Well, you know, you have a lot of energy, and I kind of want to talk about a couple of things. First and foremost, I'm a huge Polecats fan, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit. I'm a big fan of like late 70s, early 80s punk rock bands, rockabilly bands. We just interviewed Buzzcocks the other day.
Favorite bands of all time, the Buzzcocks.
There you go. Well, we specifically interviewed Steve Diggle, and Steve, if you're watching this, give Tim a call. I think you guys need to do a collaboration
Actually,
again.
we did Steve Diggle's band, Flag of Convenience, I think they were called,
Yes.
opened for the Polecats in the 80s, and we were blown away because it sounded like the Buzzcocks.
Yes, yes.
And the Polecats learned to play listening to punk rock and rockabilly, and there was only a few punk rock records out when we learned to play, and the Buzzcocks were about 3 of them.
Wow. Well, I'm so glad for you to share that, because I've heard so many other people talk about how influential the Buzzcocks were. And Steve, definitely, I was talking to Steve about kind of the experimental stuff that he and Pete Shelley both did, kind of going into the 80s. And he was really proud of his work with Flag of Convenience. Yeah. So.
Yeah, they were good. I've watched them play. They opened for us. We were blown away that one of the Buzzcocks was opening. You know, we were kids at the time. We were, this band that we worship are opening for us. So we were all... David Johansen from New York, that was also open for us in New York, and we were blown away by that as well.
Wow. Well, through the years, Tim, I mean, it sounds like you've worked with, performed with so many artists that you respect, and I'm sure Slim Jim Phantom and the guys tonight are no exception. Yeah. Through the decades, what are some other artists that you've had the pleasure of collaborating with or working with?
Well, I've actually worked with a lot of artists in another dimension, actually. I'm a production designer for film and TV. Okay. I've production designed many of the videos of the 90s. Wow. Okay. I've worked with Alice Cooper, Ozzy Osbourne, Prince. I did Baby's Got Back, the Sir Mix-a-Lot video. I worked with Vanessa Williams, B.B. King. I mean, hundreds of artists. I've worked with Dick Van Dyke, Tony Curtis, Martin Landau. I don't want to name drop, but those are some of the people I work with.
When I asked
my other capacity. Yeah.
When I asked that question innocently, I wasn't expecting a response like that. That's pretty amazing.
Well, I have another job that I'm actually more well known under my real name. You know, I'm saying my name's not Tim Polecat, it's Tim Worman. I have a real name, correct. And I have. Sometimes you don't work as a musician all the time. So, I was an art student when I was originally a musician. So I've used that for the last 50 years. Yeah.
Yes, wonderful. Well, you know, talking about, again, the kind of the influence of the Polecats, when you guys started out, you had a lot of exposure with a cover song of David Bowie, John, I'm Only Dancing, correct?
We got a lot of exposure. We got a few bricks thrown at us as well in the early days. That was a kind of an unprecedented thing for a rockabilly band, which essentially were purist bands in the early 80s and late 70s. Yes. To cover a Bowie song was like, that was sacrilege on many levels. Yeah. But we thought it was the one thing that we like to do is take other music and put it into our style, our idiom. Yeah. We did it, we tried a lot of things. That one particularly well. We tried lots of things that didn't work. We tried to do The Strand by Roxy Music. It just would not go rockabilly. Okay. There's a few other things we tried with.
Well, at that time, you know, the 70s glam movement wasn't, like, historically appreciated. It was only a couple years back, and to a lot of, like, punk rockers, you know, similar to what we talked with Steve about with the Buzzcocks, that especially going into the 80s, you know, kind of switching up their style, they got some flack from some of the, like, punk purists, or in your case, maybe the rockabilly purists or whatever.
It was a lot. We did get some flack from rockabilly purists, but we also gained more people than we lost. So, and we were very influenced because we were so young when we started out. Our first record came out in 1979. I think I was 14. Wow. We were influenced directly by punk, but also by the stuff that was just before. You know, T-Rex, Gary Glitter, all those type of 70s bands, particularly Bowie. Yeah. I remember, you know, when you used to look in ads in the New Musical Express for bands. Yep. They'd have influences, you know, Stooges, the Velvets and stuff. We didn't quite know what that was, but we did know Sweet and Gary Glitter and Slade and those bands that we really liked. And then the punk rock stuff really wasn't that different, really. It didn't sound that different from Slade, really. I mean, it just seemed different at the time because they looked different.
Yeah. Well, I want to ask you kind of a connection, talking about Boz Bohr. Of course, he's been performing with Morrissey for a long, long time. And I remember Morrissey, when he was a teenager, he used to write into NME and write like review articles for folks like T-Rex, The Dolls, a lot of the bands that you just referenced, kind of 70s glam.
I think he really liked the Monochrome set. That never comes up. If you listen to Eligible Bachelors, the Monochrome set album, and a few of the other Monochrome set records, I think you'll hear the Smiths in there.
Wow, okay. Very cool, very cool.
And I know he likes the Dolls and stuff. He did not like the Polecats. If you look at his review of the Polecats, said we could be improved by death, apparently, something like that.
Well,
but he likes our guitarist, so good luck to him.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, ironically, the fact that Boz went over and performed with him, maybe that kind of undermines the credibility of Maz's statement. I don't know, but
I'm sure I've said lots of things publicly that I later regretted.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I don't know if he regrets it. I don't know.
yeah. Well, have you performed with Boz? I know you guys did a reunion in the late '90s, right?
Perform with him all the time. We do Polecats gigs all the time. I spoke to him yesterday. In fact, because of Facebook, the Polecats current members speak to each other nearly every day. We have one of those group message things, and we talk to each other all the time.
Wow. Well,
Mostly about rubbish, like that stuff that makes only the four of us laugh, that kind of thing.
Well, that's good though. It shows the enduring nature of your guys' friendship through all these years.
Play with the original lineup, and sometimes we vary the original lineup because some members aren't available. But I've been playing with Boz since I was 12 years old, so. Yeah, and we continue to do so.
Well, one of these days, I would like to get his autograph on this. So I will be watching.
Don't send it to him. He owns a record shop. He'll just put it straight in the front row.
Hopefully, it'll get a lot of money though. It's a good.
Yeah. I mean, that Maker Circuit was an unusual rockabilly record because I think it's possibly the first one to use a drum machine. It has a drum machine on it. Gotcha. It's in fact the same drum track as Goody Two Shoes, the Adamant song.
Yes.
It's the same producer, and it's the same drum track. Not similar. It's the same. It's the same drum machine.
There was kind of a sound back in the day. I know Malcolm McLaren was involved in early Adamant, kind of appropriating some of his backing band and into Bow Wow Wow, and kind of that sound. Did you have a chance of performing with Adamant or Bow Wow Wow through the?
Well, I'm friends with Adam, and Lee from Bow Wow Wow lived at my house for a year, so yeah, I do know those guys.
Okay.
Yeah. And we're really good friends with that. There's a crossover between Boz also plays with Adam Ant once in a while. Matthew from Adam and the Ants and Bow Wow Wow went to school with Boz and had the same guitar teacher.
Wow, okay.
And then Boz taught me how to play most of my stuff on the guitar. So we kind of come from literally the same school, Orange Hill. They're the same school. Not the same school as well, the actual same school. So.
Yeah. Well, it is a small world, and this guy is very connected. I'm very excited to get a chance to interview you. So is there, in terms of staying abreast of all the latest developments with you, Tim, potential more shows with the Polecats, things like that, people can check out your website, your Facebook page?
Yeah, just go to Tim Polecat on Facebook. It's me on there. I write personal stuff, I don't post if this is a burger I just ate, or I'm feeling pissed off, someone just cut me up on the motorway. I'll find a bunch of Polecats stuff in, like an old envelope, and I'll post it, or I'll post a pair of shoes I wore on top of the pops, or I'll post I'm playing with Slim Jim, or I'm playing, a couple of months ago, I think last month I played with Lee Rocker in Canada.
Wow, okay.
Not in his band, we played on the same bill.
Okay.
But Slim Jim's played with every member of the Polecats in his band before.
Wow.
He's played with, he did a lineup with Boz, Glenn Matlock, and himself. So it was Polecat, a pistol, and a stray cat.
Yes.
He's done gigs with Phil, the bass player from the Polecats, with me. So he's two Polecats and one stray. We mixed it up a lot. We're friends, and we play similar music. We know each other's sets.
Yeah.
So.
Well, in terms of Facebook updates tonight, Tim, I don't know if you're going to post on Facebook and say, some idiot pulled me in an alleyway in San Luis Obispo and did an interview with me.
I might do. I don't know if I'm in an alleyway, but I can smell someone smoking weed round the corner.
That's true. I wanted to get away from all the crazy college kids.
That's okay. Not crazy compared to people I know.
Okay, wonderful. Well, Make a Circuit with Me, of course, was probably one of your biggest hits and was featured in a lot of different things. More recently, in 2008, in the movie Wall-E, right?
Yeah, it was in the trailer of Wall-E, yeah.
Wally has a good job. A loyal pet. And he just met the girl of his dreams.
I didn't know. Actually, funny, thank you, Morrissey fans. I read that on a Morrissey chat group. I don't know how. I Googled something and it said Morrissey blah, 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 Polecats Wally. And I went, what? And I looked it up and, yeah, they used it with They didn't ask; they just use it.
Okay, well, hopefully Pixar gave some residuals to the
I
guys.
had to hunt it down.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so you might need to get a lawyer.
It's also been used in a few films. It was used in Glory Days, the TV show.
Okay.
Yeah, hopefully it'll get used in a lot. It was used in a film called. It was used in a couple of 80s films that we discovered years and years later.
Yeah.
I hope it's kind of a signature 80s crossover because it's not just rockabilly. It's kind of an 80s track.
Yeah.
Hopefully they'll keep using it. I mean,
Yeah. Well, I'm actually a college radio DJ. I have a show called The 80s in Our Edge, and I play a lot of 80s new wave, indie, alternative, stuff like that. And that's a track that I play quite a bit, and I always get a really good response, even from younger folks that might not have been familiar with it. They ask me, who is that band? And I have the pleasure of telling them.
well, actually, we've heard some there's interesting cover versions. There's some brilliant ones. If you go on the web and you search, I think there's loads on YouTube. There's a punk rock band, the Phenomenauts.
Yes.
They're from up here, I think.
Yeah, they played here in San Luis Obispo, yeah.
They did a cover that's been played on the space station. There's some scientists doing a cover on acoustic guitars and bongos.
Yeah.
There's a guy that plays a cover of it on an accordion, and he's the only person that can figure out the chord sequence. He's the only person that's figured it out.
Wow.
And hopefully a bunch of people will cover it in. Weird Al Yankovic said he wanted to cover it, but it wasn't a big enough hit. So
He is a former KCPR DJ at the college radio station. He recorded his first track in the bathroom right next to the studio there. And so we'll definitely suggest that when we see him. He's on fire right now, too. He had a #1 album.
get him a fire extinguisher then.
Exactly. Well, speaking of DJs, sadly we're coming on the 10th anniversary of the untimely passing of John Peel. It was October 2004. Did you, back in the day, did you have the pleasure of doing any Peel sessions?
You know what? We didn't, but John Peel did play the Polecats, which surprised us because he'd usually play bands that were, kind of left field. Although he was a big fan of Gene Vincent. He's actually mentioned by name on a Gene Vincent track.
Wow, okay.
He in the intro, Gene Vincent says, "This goes out to John Peel." Blah blah. Yeah. I mean, and of course, I used to listen to the John Peel show. Yeah.
I was going to ask you, what kind of artists were you exposed to when you were younger, listening to BBC and listening to John Peel?
Well, I listened to John Peel after punk rock came out, so it would be the obvious ones like the Sex Pistols, Clash. But he'd try and play like the Slits, Susie and the Banshees. I actually heard a record called "I Want to Be Free" by the Rings, which is like this kind of pub rock turned punk band on John Peel. And I went to the shop the next morning, stood in the rain waiting to buy it. I mean, they used to listen to his show every time it was on.
Was he a huge influence on your friends? I mean, did you and your friends say, "Hey, did you listen to John last night and hear that band?"
Yeah, I think they generally talked about that. That was one of the few places you could hear punk rock on the radio. But there was also you couldn't hear rock and roll, like 50s rock and roll and rockabilly, and they had a march on the BBC. Thousands of Teddy Boys and Rockabillys marched on the BBC. Wow. And they did a show called It's Only Rock and Roll, which was a Saturday afternoon show on BBC One that used to play rock and roll and rockabilly. That
was kind of revolutionary, right? In that context, kind of the 50s revival to bring back the original Sun Records, the rockabilly movement. At that time, it wasn't a popular genre.
It was not only wasn't popular, but it was unknown. And a lot of the records that became popular in that scene had never been released or heard since they didn't even come out in the 50s. They were dead tracks. Yeah. And it was a guy from Wales went over to America and discovered these fantastic records that either never made it out of their hometown or never been released. And they got released and they'd be covered by British rockabilly and teddy boy bands. And a movement started from that. Rockabilly was never big in the 50s. The phrase was very rarely used in some songs, but it was never a movement. But it became massive in the 70s. And never went away, hopefully. Yeah.
Definitely. Timeless, indeed. Well, Tim, thanks so much for being with us. We will definitely, folks out there, check out Tim's website, his Facebook page. I personally will be very eager to see the Polecats play here at some point in the near future.
We're going to try and do an American tour next year.
I would love to.
We need work permits, though. We always do it above board. We never sneak into America. I'm American. I've lived in America, but the others haven't all got work permits, so we do it by the book. So. I don't advise other bands coming over and making out they're on holiday. It's just you're going to be in trouble.
It's hard post 9/11 sometimes to get work visas. I've interviewed other musicians from the UK who have had little bureaucratic snafus that have prevented them from coming up. Ben Watt was from Everything But the Girl was one artist we talked to.
Right. Yeah, you have to do it by the book now. So, We did that last time we played here, and we do that every time now. But it makes it so you can't do the small. You have to do more expensive, bigger shows because it's expensive to do. True. So it works out both ways.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Tim, for your time. And again, look forward to all of Tim's work, either in terms of production and music. A lot of exciting things going on there. Thanks so much, Tim, for being with us.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Make good with